Hi, and a very good day, everyone. This is Zach. Today's topic is a little bit different from before, and I can assure you that since we are very close to the new Shadowlands expansion, people already start to think for of course, the best Mythic Plus composition. What are the classes that consider to be most viable and brings a lot to the table, not only in DPS but utility kit as well, for a certain packs of mobs that might not be required to kill? Well guys, for this video, I got you all covered, but please bear in mind that currently tweaking and balancing of classes are still in progress, and we are going to get the exact firm class design when we are very close to the release of Shadowlands. Alright then, for this one we are going to talk about recommended or best dungeon Shadowlands setup for Mythic Plus. Well folks, there are so many factors that needs to be taken into consideration when it comes to the composition, and for those who are just regular Mythic Plus team, they might not taking these options as something like compulsory to be taken, but Mythic Plus high-end players, this recommendation and my sincere opinion might gonna help you guys to give some thoughts. Anyway guys, if you would like to correct me of something or giving your own thoughts, feel free to drop into the comments box down below. As usual guys, to ask for your utmost favor, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more future contents, and remember to ring the bell. Let's roll it. First and foremost, that I can say the basic elements of toolkit that needs to have, whereby without this things it might gonna give you team a little bit of problem down the run based on my experience, and as well some discussion with the top tier key pusher. Next is the class synergies and requirements for dungeon, with the ideal composition can definitely change not only on damage output but even depending on the affixes, what dungeon and so on. Alright team, here we go. With the Covenant system still tweaking and mix of, some people are not happy about just bear for a while, and hopefully Blizzard will do at better most tuning. The most important one I would say is Battle Res, aka B-Res, that you almost never want to step inside of a dungeon without it. There is no further explain on how important this is, but since we have a new version of engineering Battle Res for Shadowlands, but it's considered not that good due to the costing time when resurrecting a dead player. Secondly, of course, a Bloodlust or Heroism, and I think having a natural class Bloodlust is actually going to be a pretty big deal, especially with the first seasoning of FX Prideful. If you need to know more details about Prideful, the link is under the description below. In Shadowlands, Bloodlust now gives double the effects of its leather-working counterparts drums due to nerf, and most of your Bloodlust will also have a very solid interaction with full Prideful buff and strong cooldown to use with the buff. I do think that it's not 100% required for every group because of, let's say, if to pick up pugs is a bit hard, so can use the drum. If having a stake or same group might be the trick. Despite that, in my opinion, classes that offer loss will both be popular and needed in the top groups. The third one is to include all covenants, which I can say not something that might not be important at all for the moderate group just for the sake of completion or run into a moderate level of keys. But for a group of 5 same players taken together or key pusher, you almost certainly want to have one member of each covenant to retrieve all of the covenant's specific dungeon buffs. Switching around class due to dungeon specialty is not a thing, so if possible to discuss with the team members to acquire different covenants, at least not the same type, to get the unique specialty buff in a certain dungeon, unless if the bonus system got reworked. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the hardest part, I would say, is the class list. Since it's very likely we may see some Covenants balance updates that change certain classes down the run. Alright then, let's start our recommendation class that I'm gonna select my ideal spec in each slot and also mention some other class substitutes whenever necessary. This is really tough, so bear with me for a while, and I'm just making my judgment based on current beta and as well discussion with my fellow friends. I'm going to start with tanks, healers, and then go down the list of DPS. I think tanks might be the hardest one to decide. Before there was a pretty clear standing of tanks on which one is the tier list. However, I think the most recent balance patch was actually good, and I was surprised to see a pretty fair adjustment to tanks. Although not everything will be completely equal, I guess. Current tank I'm gonna pick up is Blood Death Knight, with some nerfs to Protection Paladin, Brewmaster Monk, and Vengeance DH. It looks like Blood DK might be the most survivable tank now at the beginning of the expansion, apart from offering a great survivability and a powerful utility kit like Anti-Magic Zone for boss encounters. With the Undead control alongside with Sacrificial Pacts will have uses in so many dungeons. But there is also the weaknesses from this spec that Blood has is very heavy spike damage taken and dying in the spam of a global. However, early expansion it is not likely to encounter enemies scaling too crazy for this thing to happen. Then Blood DK has solid all-around damage, survivability, and utility, which is the reason they are my recommended tank to pick so far. I do believe that many other tanks are competing at a high level, like Vengeance Demon Hunter and Protection Paladins aren't quite good in survivability, but their huge damage makes them a powerful asset. Not to forget, Brewmaster is also quite a powerful tank as well, even though they are very durable and do good damage. They lack the same utility kit that Blood DK does. To summarize for the tanks, I would say if you want to choose one from these 4 tanks should be viable in my opinion. Alright then, to all my friends, let's have a look for my pick under healer, whereby I would say less competition. Resto Druids and Discipline Priests were in most likely near to fair, or I can say on par in beta. But with a lot of changes, tweaks, and tuning, I believe that Resto Druids definitely in number 1 spot with their high amounts of good utility, along with strong mastery healing, especially on HOTS. And with a smaller party size, Druids are in a good shape for dungeon, although Druids are a bit lacking behind in terms of damage to some of the other healing classes, similar to tanks, and I do think early on that survivability will matter more for Druids. Non-cooldown, relatively strong AoE healing makes it as my top pick from all other healers. The runner-up now, and of course Holy Paladin, even though some people are not like the idea of Holy Power Edition thing. As the gear gets better, paladins could slowly climb back to the top with their strong burst healing and consistent solid damage. I think they are a good second choice. It is possible that most healers will work well with Blood Decay. Well, given that they don't require as much single target healing, and besides to cover the Night Fray aspect of Covenants as well as Battle Rest. That is one which is very useful. The downside I did not mention that although Resto Druid and Blood Decay are relatively strong, but they currently share the same base covenant, which is Night Fray. This means in an ideal dungeon setup, one of them will have to switch, or the other three covenants will need to be filled by the other partying members. The next group is DPS, or Damage Dealer. Now for DPS, since that there are so many type specs and requires 3 slots for a dungeon, this is going to be a bit tricky. The first one is very damn of course every tier's expansions must have this, which is a rogue. Well folks, I was not happy about this one either. For most of BFA, it was almost a requirement to have a rogue in your group if you wanted to complete or time a dungeon at a high level, even honestly at a medium level. The Rogue's Toolkit is just so well suited to Mythic Plus, but some of you might wondering why is it a necessity to have Rogue in every group? Well, there are 3 solid reasons. First is of course the obvious one is Shroud of Concealment, aka Shrouding. A lot of the dungeons like Plaguefall or Necrotic Wake are being structured in such a way that you have to use skips method in order to avoid certain packs that are not required for completion due to not wasting the remaining timer. Through skipping, these mobs are not only safer but also much faster. A rogue will save you more massively of time than any other DPS class in these situations. Rogue also has a reliable interrupt and many physical stunts, which can be useful in dungeons as at a certain point, often have lots of important deadly spell casts from boss or mobs, whereby some of which cannot be interrupted and needs to be stunned whenever possible. Especially if we see more range DPS like Mage or Warlock or Hunter that don't have as many stopping abilities with longer interrupt. We will see another greater needs for Rogue's tricks of the trait spell on helping the tank with threats, especially in bigger, more spread out pools can be a lifesaver. TOT is a huge help to tanks and allows DPS to play much more aggressively. Right now, judging from the spec or talent, it looks like Subtlety is the best spec for rogues, with Outlaw and Assassination spec kinda in a good spot as compared to Outlaw. Next DPS slot is our last class, and ideally would like to slot in a solid DPS with Bloodlust. Currently, it looks like Frost Mage is a clear winner here with solid damage, including a large AoE damage which can slow the praise. It has been a good idea to have a Frost Mage setup inside the group, since tanks threats might be dropping due to the low damage to generate threats in early expansion, so needs to kiting up while slowing the mobs with Mage slow ability. Marksmanship Hunter is also a solid choice, even though it's not popular in BFA, but for the recent buff on Chimera Shot, seems the spec rise up again, having a binding shot as well as their own Bloodlust, so they are a great replacement for Mage, especially if the group got Warrior Battle Shout to increase their damage. Hunters also bring a class spell that mages do not have, which is Soothe. Soothe is incredibly useful in many dungeons, especially during the Raging Epics, or if you are not playing with Resto Druid. Alright everyone, now finally we have one more DPS slot open, and mostly we have covered the basic of everything, and now to look for a spec that will do big damage and match up with the other members of the group. Currently on beta, and it might be more tuning happening, will be Destruction Lock or Destro. Warlock is doing a very huge amounts of consistent damage and also has some niche utility with Health Stone, Gateway to skip at certain packs, and another Battle Rest as well. Currently in beta, Warlocks are doing some of the highest damage of any other class, and we will be surprised if we might see them dominating the highest keys in the first season of Shadowlands. Demon Hunter is a good spec to pick if the dungeon composition mostly filled with magic damage due to that Chaos brand, which can increase the magic damage and together with reliable crowd control ability. For Fury Warriors as well could end up being a good setup due to party-wide spell Reflect is an insanely powerful offensive and defensive ability. It could definitely be used to beat bosses that are incredibly difficult in high keys, and also help to mitigate the damage on high prideful buff. Last one for my recommendation is a Boomkin, even though there's other remaining DPS specs to compare with, but a Boomy should fit in here. In terms of damage, Boomkin is not that good, but the utility things that brings to the table like trees, innovates, and off-heals makes it much better in the dungeon setup. Alright then everyone, those are my 5 character selections and recommendation for the Mythic Plus composition in Shadowlands. Hopefully these tips can give you a roughly idea of how the meta build is going to be set up soon. As usual, it is just my personal overview, which may be right or wrong. If you have any ideas, concern, opinion, anything to add up, feel free to drop under the comments box down below to discuss. Appreciate for your full support. Thank you everyone for watching, and see you again in the next video. Take care, stay safe, and have a pleasant day.